Attention listeners, ahead are spoilers.
Hello, and welcome to the Movie Trap. My name is Russell Carlsen, and don't call me Francis, because I am joined with my partner, Chris Dorff.
Hello. Don't move, don't blink, don't even breathe. It's from the poster.
And
That's
I
all
am
I got.
also Yeah, right, Jesus. And now I am also joined with my other partner and co-host, Zach Bowers.
Yeah, I forgot we were supposed to do a quote, so I'm just going to be like the Dennis Leary I'm an asshole song. So there you go.
I know every word of that song, by the way. Okay, on the Movie Trap, each of the hosts, one of the hosts that you just met, picks a theme, and then each of the hosts picks a movie based on that theme. After we've watched all three movies, we then vote with an allocated amount of points. We get 10 points each, plus 3 bonus points that we can give around to each other for whatever reason we see fit. Once we've watched all three, we then vote using the allocated amount of points that we have earned, and whoever's host movie wins, that host gets to pick the next theme. And you are unfortunately having to deal with back-to-back Russell themes. Because, I'm not gonna lie, I don't love this theme all that much. It was sort of a back pocket, sort of a 3 a.m. thought process. I honestly didn't think I was gonna win the last theme, so I didn't come fully prepared, but I always kind of had this one in my back pocket.
Yeah, you only presented Fargo, which, you know, is a shit movie that would never win.
I thought There Will Be Blood would really pushed it over, but I underestimated how much we all love fucking Fargo. Anyway, what is the past, because now we are dealing with a brand new theme, because as I said in last episode, that I feel like we've been dealing with much too high a quality of movies now, so I thought we should roll up our sleeves and get into the drex. Boy, with this one did I deliver, because the theme is movie soundtracks that are better than the actual movie it's associated with. And I chose 1993's Judgment Night. We'll talk about the soundtrack later, but yeah, that's how we are. That's the theme we are in. So say what you will about the soundtrack, it's certainly better than the movie. So with that in mind, Zach, why don't you get into your yuppie RV and take us to the dark dystopian world that is Southside Chicago.
Okay, Judgment Night is a film from 1993. It's an action film directed by Stephen Hopkins, who, I don't know what, from Predator 2 and Nightmare on Elm Street 5, The Dream Child. It stars Emilio Estevez, Cuba Gooding Jr., Jeremy Piven, Stephen Dorff, and Dennis Leary. So essentially, this is a film chronicling a group of four 30-something, probably 30-something Chicagoans, or Chicago suburbanites, who decide one night to travel in an RV to see a boxing match. Much to their consternation, they find the freeway is clogged. And after getting into a brief spat with another driver who will not let them merge, they continue forward, mostly missing the match, and end up cutting off through a poor, sort of almost completely empty neighborhood, where they accidentally bump into a guy with their RV, but they find he's in far more grievous condition than they thought. He's been shot already. After taking him on board with the intent of helping him, they are T-boned by a car and forced into an alleyway where they can not escape in their RV. And the men who were looking for this young man come along, manage to pull him from the RV and murder him in cold blood. It turns out it's a bunch of drug dealers led by Dennis Leary, also including Peter Green, who you might know as the villain from The Mask and or Zed from Pulp Fiction. And they decide no witnesses and proceed to track down these four for much of the rest of the night. Initially, they run through this weirdly empty area. They briefly stow away with a group of homeless people, but ultimately arguing alerts the criminals to their location, and they shoot a couple of the fleeing homeless while the other four escape. Then they go to a housing project where they convince a couple of young women to let them use their phone to try and connect to call the police. The police do not show up, as police are wont to do in real emergencies. And they try to escape through the rooftop as the criminals come through the bottom floor. On the rooftop, they find an old, fire escape ladder connecting two buildings where they can, cross over and maybe manage to escape these guys coming up from the bottom floor. But Jeremy Piven, who has been a greedy coward the entire movie thus far, is too scared to cross the makeshift bridge, which is partially collapsing, and attempts to negotiate with the criminals. It does not go well. They throw him off the building. Following that, they escape into a sewer grate, where, because they're talking loudly, they are found by the criminals anyway. And at that point, Cuba Gooding Jr. says, "We gotta make a stand." They each grab blunt weapons. One of the criminals manages to find them in some kind of sewage station, and they disarm and kill him. At this point, they're worried that is Peter Green, the second in command. They find that Cuba Gooding Jr. is perhaps being too aggressive in this situation. That's his character trait. And then Dennis Leary kills one of his other two underlings in a fit of rage after seeing his best friend Peter Green dead. He drowns him in sewage. Meanwhile, they escape up to the streets, where they attempt to catch a bus, does not work, and continue on their merry path. Eventually, the criminals catch up to them once again at some kind of multi-level market place, where they have their big final confrontation, at which point Cuba Gooding Jr., who is still on the aggressive, still acting aggressively, trying to confront them, is shot in the stomach, but survives. And another one of the mooks is killed in the confrontation, leaving only Dennis Leary. Stephen Dorff, who is Emilio Estevez's brother, is also injured in the leg in the confrontation. Finally, after a bunch of bullshit, Emilio Estevez confronts Dennis Leary himself, and after a struggle, throws him down a staircase, killing him. And the police finally show up at this point, and it seems like Cuba and Stephen Dorff are going to survive, and Emilio goes home to his friends, having killed the four evil villains.
The other thing we should mention real quick is that one of the evil villains is Everlast, the rapper, singer, multi-talented triple or at least double threat. I don't know if he can dance.
I don't think I've ever asked. I don't think anybody's ever asked him. But yeah, at the time he wasn't Everlast. He was still in House of Pain, who was featured on this movie's soundtrack.
Well, I didn't mention that because I didn't recognize him.
Yep, that is him.
Yes.
I barely recognize Stephen Dorff. I totally forgot that he was in this movie. I forgot a lot about this movie. I'm not gonna lie, guys. Even at the beginning when they're playing the De La Soul song, I was like, oh yeah, they do. So I think when I pitched this movie last episode that they don't really feature the soundtrack that I like so much in the movie. They actually do a lot more than I remembered, but they do it in the typical kind of way that you use these soundtracks when pop artists make songs for the movie. They're like on the radio or something, or in somebody's apartment off stage or something. Very rarely is it like a driving force for the movie, and usually if it is, it's at the beginning or the end. Usually,
I'd say most of the music they used in this. It seems like most of the music they used in this was the De La Soul song, just because it starts off happy in the suburbs, gets, I guess, scary as it can possibly get in the movie in the middle, and then at the end it gets happy again and the song comes back. So even though most of the album is rap rock hybrid stuff, the thing that gets the most use out of this is do, 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 do. I can't remember the song, but it's the song.
Teenage Fan Club and De La Soul. Sampling Tom Petty. And that's why it's I'll get on the soundtrack later, but as far as the movie, I mean, like, I don't know about you guys, but like, so I read on the IMDb page that this is sort of seen like a remake to Deliverance. Pretty dumb way to remake that movie. Pretty dumb way to, because like a bunch of yuppies getting stranded in the bad side of town doesn't necessarily carry the same weight as Deliverance, because the whole point of Deliverance is that they're damming up this river, right? This is the last chance they're going to ride that river. And what happens to him is like almost like nature kind of fighting back and man not being able to deal with the consequences of that. That's more to me and Deliverance is more of a horror movie. If this movie was more of a horror movie, it probably would have worked a little better. Maybe with different actors.
I guess this is the urban environment fighting back as opposed to nature.
Yeah. I will say that both films have just as much homophobia, though. That was one thing that popped out in both of them to me.
Fair enough.
So I just have a question.
No, to be fair, no one is actually raped in this film, unlike Deliverance.
True.
Unlike Deliverance.
Why did they turn off the TV in the vehicle? Like on the road, they're driving along, and they're obviously going to be stuck in the car for hours. And Jeremy Piven's like, "Turn that TV off. We're driving there." And it's like, you're not driving there. You're still in traffic. You could have just watched the game.
What a nitpick. Right. That is the weirdest nitpick for this movie. But I guess that's true.
There's a lot of nitpick. Like, first of all, okay, the whole premise of Dennis Leary, like, Sarah was watching it, and then she, like, came in and caught, like, the end of it, and she's like, so wait, does Dennis Leary and Emilio know each other? I'm like, oh, no, not really. He just got...
He finds his wallet at a certain point and learns his name and decides, like, he has a personal grudge against specifically this guy of the four guys. But there's no reason... Like, it's not like, so an example, and this is actually produced by the same guy who made this movie, but who produced this movie, but like in Die Hard, there is a reason that Alan Rickman hates Bruce Willis specifically. This is the guy fucking up his plan, causing all these problems. In this one, Dennis Leary decides he hates Emilio Estevez out of these four guys for no discernible reason. It's just the guy whose name he knows.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. But even the whole premise of like no witnesses, right? The fuck do you care? Just drive away. It's a stone cold who.
At a certain point, what are you gonna
do? Yeah. Right.
Cut your losses.
Let it go.
I mean,
like
I would honestly,
maybe.
I would honestly love like a skit that's just like what you're describing, where it's just they just have to clean up the mess and they have to kill all witnesses, so it just turns into them like just killing everyone because people just keep coming and seeing the bodies.
And just the cumulative witnesses do pile. Like, there's these two women who now know that basically, like, if they see these people's faces on the news, they're gonna know what. Like, oh yeah, I know those two of those guys. Like, there's gradually an increasing number of people. A stock boy comes in at one point and is shot at. Are they going to kill that guy later? I don't know.
It's also like,
Jesus
what is
Christ,
the business that they're doing? Because he keeps saying he's a businessman, and then they just chase and chase and chase, and it's like, man, when are you going to go off and just do some more business? What do these people see you do? Like, you killed one guy.
That's right. Like, in the set. Right, in the summary, Zach described Dennis Leary and his gang, I guess, as drug dealers, but it's never explicitly clear what the merchandise is. It just says he's a businessman and you're supposed to move merchandise and you stole
It's
from
probably
me, and that's why I gotta kill
drugs,
you.
I imagine.
Yeah, I mean, sure. I that's the logical conclusion, but you never deal with drugs or using drugs. Hell, the soundtrack has more to do with drugs than the fucking movie does. Like, I don't know. Like, the whole, it kind of, it was trying to be like, you know, those bad early 90s action movies, right? Like I'm talking Seagal bad, you know, like where it's just like, okay, if we have an explosion in there, we could put it on the poster, put Emilio with a gun on it, it'll do just fine. Problem is, I think the reason why they kind of made the soundtrack with Universal, you know, kind of being the parent company is they somehow, Emilio Estevez somehow convinced them to pay him like $4 million for this movie, which at that year was like the highest paid actor. So I figured they're like, well, look, we got to recoup expenses because this movie's not gonna it's not gonna make our money back. So why don't we just get all these pop artists that we've already got on contract and just throw them on a contract and make them do a soundtrack? Do they need to see the movie? Not really. It doesn't really matter.
We should note. We got a couple, like there were some people who were like big names that had fingers on this project, like touched it briefly, like a baton being passed around. Like the script, which was written by some guy named Kevin Jare, something like that. He wrote Rambo First Blood Part 2. But there was like draft revisions that went through. John Carpenter, Christopher Crowe, William Wisher, who worked with James Cameron on Terminator and Terminator 2. And in terms of actors, like the original choices for the leads were, John Travolta for the Emilio Estevez role and Kevin Spacey for the villain. And it also says here, Ray Liotta, Tom Cruise, Samuel L. Jackson, and Christian Slater were, quote, either offered or had turned down roles in the film, which I really like that phrasing because I like the idea that they weren't offered, but they still turned them down preemptively.
Just reflexively said, no thanks, I'll pass.
Yeah, if they call me up about Judgment Night, just tell them I'm dead.
Yeah. But even the fucking title, Judgment Night, right? All it does is just like invoke like this some sort of like, oh my god, Judgment Night, Emilio Estevez.
Which is especially funny when one of the people who like touched up the script was William Wisher, who wrote Terminator 2 Judgment Day.
Right.
Maybe they just like saw the name and they're like, maybe it's a judgment thing. We give it to him,
you know,
see what he does.
The word judgment has a J and a U. I think that looks good on a poster. You know, like it's anyway. It's so 90s.
This movie's weird because it's like the tamest action film I've seen. Like, it uses so much like 90s shorthand in it that I'm never really afraid or surprised when anything happens. Like, I'm not surprised when Jeremy Piven gets pushed off the roof. I'm not surprised when they get into trouble with the drug dealers. Like, they build up like these confrontations. I'm not surprised that they kill a lot of the bad guys. The only thing that really surprised me is that a couple of the guys that got shot were like, oh no, he's gonna be fine, because I was like, I could see them killing the friend.
I thought Cuba Gooding Jr. would die because, like, Cuba Gooding Jr. for like half the movie, they're like, "You're too aggressive. You're too obsessed with like getting even, and we should be more interested in being safe." Like, I thought he was going to die for that perceived sin.
Yeah, or the little brother.
But,
like, I figured the little brothers had like little characterization that they were like just having him there as a body to get shot and feel bad about. But no, he just gets through the movie and you're like, all right, I guess white people just wander through this neighborhood and no one actually dies. It's weird.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. Yeah. I mean,
when I saw. One more tidbit. Adam Carolla was a stand-in for one of the villains in one scene. But otherwise, this is the kind of movie where, like, if I were visiting home, right, and hanging out with my dad, and we were like, oh, let's put on a movie, like, this would be a movie that I don't remember but is unobjectionable to watch with my dad. Like, that is this kind of movie.
Sure. It's for what it's worth, it's competently made. Like,
Yeah,
it's
not
in it.
terrible.
Right. Yeah,
I mean,
not
they
like.
Yeah, true. They worked really hard on it. It's like you can tell that whoever shot it really was awake and aware and doing their best. Like, they have bunches and bunches of really beautiful split diopter shots that are moody and cinematic, and it all happens at night, and it looks beautiful. And I felt bad for the crew because you could tell that some real talent went into making some real crap.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This movie is ultimately, like, almost worse than bad. It's fine. Like, if you watch it on a Sunday afternoon with a hangover, you're like, all right, well, that was something.
Yeah.
That was a way to spend 2 hours of getting over last night.
I mean, there's just not enough substance to the movie, There's just nothing. There's not a lot of there. It's pretty much as soon as they meet Dennis Leary, it's just chase. Like, and if we're gonna do that, you should have had it a lot earlier in the movie. I mean, because you don't really get any personal stakes with Emilio. That's why I agree with Dorff. Like, if they had killed the little brother, it would have been like, it would have been your classic '90s cliffhanger thing of like, this is for you, like. This for you, John Boy. There was no that moment. All he did is like, you mentioned my wife and don't call me Francis and shit like that. I tried to tally. I tried to tally how many times I rolled my eyes.
Well, like, comparing that with like character justifications, the idea that Emilio Estevez would say like cold-hearted shit to people as he's shooting them, like, we've seen nothing to suggest that he's a cold-hearted killer. Like, I would have accepted it way more if he got there and he was just terrified and confused about what had happened, or if this was violence beyond what he was used to.
Very vague indications that, like, he had a rough and tumble path. Like, there's early in the movie, his wife's there, and I don't know, she seems mildly disapproving of him going out with his old gang, like all the old boys, and it's like maybe he used to have like a rough side. And then later on, Cuba Gooding Jr. is often like, oh, you're not the John, I don't know what the character's name is, that I used to know, like,
Not Francis. Don't call him that.
Oh, it was Francis. That's right, Frank. Yeah.
They call him Frank, right, yeah.
Like, he's like, that's not the Frank I used to know who would, like, go in for whatever, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
I don't know. Everybody has one character trait, right? Jeremy Piven is concerned about his money, and he's a coward. So he has two. He's very unsympathetic and fucking awful, and you don't like him at all. So he's Jeremy Piven. And
yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah. He
then
found his type early in career.
The little brother is like a little bit cowardly, like he's a little bit shy, like he can't step up quite enough, and he kind of does it to save Cuba Gooding Jr. at the end. And Cuba Gooding Jr. is not growing up and too aggressive. Like, they're supposed to be like, oh, we're in the next phase of our life. We're supposed to be suburban fucking beer dads now. And some of them are accepting it better than others, I guess, is the moral of the story.
Yeah, that kind of felt like what they were trying to do. It seemed weird, though, because of the age of the actual actors, because they all seemed a lot more put together and adult than I think would be believable if you were still being a hooligan at, like, your mid-30s, you know? Everybody looked too clean and clear and, like, not particularly grizzled or weird or extreme.
Right. I mean, we're talking about a bunch of yuppies, right? So, like, what's the worst violence they've ever gotten into? Like a bar brawl or, like, something at a fucking, like, that's... That, and I realize that's sort of the point. It would
do with some more backstory, with like an incident.
Well, either that or don't have any backstory. I think this movie would have been a lot better served had there been about 80% less dialogue. If it would just use the atmosphere and like the kind of the scraping of the knife against the boxcars, I thought that was, like you could really, there was moments there where like, oh, I can kind of see where you wanted to go, but then the studio's like, boy, you saw those action movie numbers, right? We better action it up a bit, so like that's kind of where they leaned towards.
It felt like they're trying to do like a modern Night of the Hunter, and it's just they couldn't make anybody seem that scary, and they definitely couldn't make anything have that sort of fear in the sequence, because they have a lot of good setups. They have like creative, interesting setups that don't have really good payoffs. Like we joked about the stock boy who is pushing his little stock cart as they're shooting
Funniest
guns.
part of the movie.
And the whole thing is that the bullets aren't hitting him. They're going through like many cans of Mountain Dew or whatever was on that thing and stopping before they get to him. And he's got his headphones in, so he can't hear that he's being shot at. So it's just this fun action sequence. Like Dennis Leary keeps shooting, and he's like, why does it keep coming? And it's got this comical moment, and it's just this one little moment of like the filmmakers coming alive in an otherwise completely dead experience. It's weird.
Yeah, there's like moment. Yeah. There's like the crossing of the buildings on the makeshift bridge is like a decent idea for an action movie sequence. Like, it's not like next level, but it's fine. It's like a good moment of suspense. It's a classic narrow bridge, high ledge, but there's also things that are like Dennis Leary as this big bad villain, and we could talk about his performance, but his death was like, I thought he might have survived that fall, and I think even the movie plays with that idea when the cops show up, but like it seems like a very anticlimactic death. It's not the kind of death you expect for like the main villain of an action movie where they get shoved through a steam pipe or fall off of Nakatomi Plaza or something.
Yeah, it felt like that. It felt like Die Hard, where they set it up for the bad guy at the end, but then he just never shows up again. You're like, but you guys had a whole lingering shot, and you made us wait on it, and then nothing happens.
The funniest part is when he's like about to fall off the edge, he's like on the railing that's collapsing, and he's like, help me out, man. This guy who's been nothing but a sociopath the entire time. And Emilio Estevez is like, okay, I'll help you out. It's like, why? This man has clearly wanted to kill you from moment one.
I mean, it's totally a melodrama. That's like a perfect example. It's like something where the character, no writer or no reasonable character would ever do that, but the movie makes it happen because you have to have something where the villain falls. You can't have the cold moment where the main hero is like, you know what? Maybe it's okay to kill evil people. You just can't.
Don't call me Francis.
Oh,
not even kill them, not endanger yourself to try and save this guy who, if he gets a gun, is going to shoot you in the head in a second, or just try to strangle you if he gets back on solid land.
What was the timeline? Sorry, go ahead.
That's why I didn't see a lot of logic in Cuba Gooding Jr.'s argument of being like, nope, we're going to make our stand here, because this is the edge of civilization and we'll never get back.
They're in the middle of fucking Chicago.
Right, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, you can't find a fucking bodega, homie? Come on, let's go. This is okay. This happens in movies occasionally, but this is like this is one of the biggest cities in the United States. I just want you to be clear. Like, it's the third biggest population after New York and LA, and in terms of population density, it's only after New York, and fucking nobody's around. This is a ghost town, my friends. They travel for miles. Right! And there's just nobody, huh? Even the bus they try to chase down, there's nobody on the damn bus. Which, that's bullshit. Like, even under those L trains, those are constantly people there. Yeah. Like, it's madness to me.
It's obvious that it's just coincidental and, or not coincidental. It's a nice thing for the filmmakers because they can have these coincidences where just no one shows up, or happy coincidences happen, like they find them in the sewer. When they've been quiet outside of that. Like, every time they hide, they get found again because of some coincidence. And, like, other things happen that are even weirder. Like, at one point, they're going door to door inside of a building asking for help, essentially just busting the doors down like cops, asking to use phones. And nobody hangs out long enough to wait until the actual cops show up, because I'm pretty sure, even in this weird neighborhood, if you're kicking down doors, someone's going to call the cops.
That many gunshots. that many.
I mean, they do
gunshots.
call the cops in that sequence, and and they say like, "It's been 17 minutes. Where are they?" And people are like, "Oh, people die of old age waiting for the cops to show up here."
I mean, I
Because
guess I
it's-
would have just expected someone else to have called the cops for them. Like, it seems like
Right.
that would have been a more straightforward, like, hey, can you call the cops for me? And then
You
somebody
would
else
think
would do it.
all the gunfire would.
Yeah.
There's gunfire all
some
over the
neighbor.
city.
Right.
And they go, well, I want to briefly talk about the path they traverse in this this night of terrors. So they start in suburban Chicago. Presumably it's supposed to be Evanston. In point of fact, it's somewhere in LA. And this ties into why I think this film is set in Chicago, by the way. So then they drive down the freeway. You would think it's a freeway here. In point of fact, it's a freeway in LA. Then they travel through this rail yard in Chicago. In point of fact, it's a rail yard in LA. And then they get to the projects, and that's Chicago. That was filmed in Chicago. Those buildings aren't there anymore.
That was supposed
and-
to be Cabrini Green or something, right?
Probably something like that. It wasn't the actual Cabrini Green, but it was, some project that used to exist and doesn't anymore. And then they go through the sewers, and then they come out, and there's a shot under the L train, which is in fact in Chicago. And then they go to Fullerton Market. Now, in Chicago, there is a Fulton Market, about 11 miles from Woodlawn, where they were before. So they walked a good 9 miles. There is no Fullerton Market. There is a Fullerton Market in Los Angeles, where they filmed that scene. So they filmed exactly one sequence in Chicago. It is the sequence that takes place at the housing project. And I'm assuming like urban blight and poverty is the reason this takes place in Chicago and not LA. Because otherwise it was entirely filmed in LA.
I mean, the crazy
I
thing
don't
is,
know.
The crazy thing is watching it, like, I would buy that this was supposed to be LA now way more than Chicago then. Like, if you were to show this to me now, I'd be like,
Yeah.
oh, okay, yeah, they got off on the wrong spot on the 101. Of course they're going to have trouble getting through that traffic. But for Chicago, no, I don't have any memories of even traffic that extreme in Chicago. I don't think of traffic when I think of Chicago.
It happens sometimes, but like, I just think it's the structure of their journey going from suburban LA to Southside Chicago to uptown LA again, and then also even if it is all Chicago and Fullerton Market is supposed to be something like Fulton Market, they walked like 9 to 10 miles and didn't see fucking nobody.
Anybody? No cop, huh? Not a single cab. Nothing. Like it's preposterous. That's why
And the villains were able to track them.
Right. Yeah. Right. With sound and smell only.
Yeah.
Because they're super villains or whatever. And
the concept isn't that bad. It's the way they paid it off is bad.
Yeah.
Like, the idea of being chased through a city itself is fun, especially if you get off the beaten track. However, it also wouldn't work now. Like, this is a film, like, trapped in the 90s because, like, anybody just jump on a cell phone now. Like, this whole thing would be done.
Yeah. Well, a cell phone would solve the problem. That's a problem a lot of horror movies and actually all genres of movies have, like, that's a problem.
For sure.
But,
and even
in the
crime.
90s, this is like fucking a ghost town. Like in the 90s, I'm sure this is not like there were people on the streets 24 hours a day in Chicago in the 90s, I'm sure, as there are today. Like, it's absurd.
It's completely ridiculous because that's why even the first crime that they witness, the catalyst, it sets off the whole night of fun, right? It makes no sense that there's these 4 strangers here. What would real criminals do in that situation where they're just assassinating an underling? They get back in their cars and they drive the fuck away. That's what would happen. And the yuppies are not.
Where's he going? He's going to the hospital. Okay,
Right.
well then we'll
this
fucking
guy shot
find
this
him at the
guy.
hospital.
Okay, sir, I'm officer friendly. Who shot him? I have no idea. Well, another whodunit in the projects. You know, like that's
Yeah, he
this
gets
is not
sent.
a criminal who really thinks forward here.
These yuppies send him to the hospital, and you wait for him to get out of the hospital and fucking finish the job.
I mean, this had to just be how people who were not anywhere near street level crime thought street level crime worked. Like
Exactly. That's
so silly.
You're getting a point for that one, because that's my whole point about this. This is why it's kind of stupid to think of it as a remake to Deliverance, because like the idea here is that the underworld of the other side of the tracks are completely alien and foreign, and how will I even talk to a homeless person? I have no idea what I'm doing here.
The homeless person who can't even knows the situation, knows that there's a violent criminal, and still immediately devolves into a shouting match. I don't know. And also, I don't know. I think this is an example of this thing that still happens very frequently. Trump was a big fan of doing this, which is using Chicago as this poster child for this is a den of fucking depravity and sin, and if you live there, you will be dead in 48 fucking hours. And I don't know, man. I've lived here for 5 years, and I ain't never been mugged or involved in a crime or violently assaulted.
It's just like the same shit when I lived in New York, you know, it's 90% of the people who live there have no experiences with violent crime. Probably more than 90%. So I imagine it's the same thing in Chicago. And even when they do, it's nothing like this. This is a roller coaster ride. This is a fun house. This doesn't exist. This isn't real. You know, and it's almost like they saw. I was mentioning this off air. It's like they saw Escape from New York and thought, inner cities are like that today. You know, we don't even need to see into the future. That's how it's like today. It's just a dystopian hellscape where it's just every man dog eat dog world out there. And I'm like, that isn't accurate. That's fucking bullshit. Is there lots of crime in poor areas? Sure. Is you going into those neighborhoods going to immediately expose you to said crime? No. Not at all. For the most part, most people are living fucking let live.
Yeah. This is definitely a very Reaganite view of the inner city. You could see this a lot. Well, you mentioned earlier, Predator 2. I don't know if I've ever heard of terrifying Jamaican gangs in New York, but evidently they're all the terror in Predator 2. It's really strange. But hey, guys, what is up with this soundtrack? Because we watched this terrible movie for the soundtrack.
Okay, yeah,
I
guess
feel like we should talk
for
about
the
this
soundtrack. Well, okay, because I gotta underline something here, Jet. I love this soundtrack, but my musical taste, it's kind of hitting right where the sweet spot there, because not just, it's easy to call it rock rap, but it's a little bit more than that, because you're already having kind of either established groups from disparate genres like Sonic Youth and Cypress Hill, or you're having people who have delved in the metal phase, like Ice-T and Slayer, right? Because Ice-T was with Body Count, they did Cop Killer and what have you. So it's not like it's that big of a stretch for him to do a song with Slayer, which is basically just a bunch of exploited songs mixed in together, which rocks, by the way. I love it. So this is from a purely subjective point of view, where I'm coming from. I love it. But objectively, I think it's safe to say that because the soundtrack in the movie was released in 1993, it's kind of right at that era where popular music was really shifting to this rock rap phase, where Limp Bizkit, Slipknot, Korn, what have you. It's kind of right at that. Rock and rap have always been kind of, bosom buddies for a second. It dates all the way back to the 80s with Run DMC, who's also on this soundtrack. Beastie Boys, what have you. Sure. Yeah, and then like I said, with Ice-T and Body Count in the later part of the 80s, absolutely, in the 90s, you bet. Hell, Public Enemy did a song with Anthrax. This is not new in these worlds. But what I appreciated about it is that you're using actual popular artists that are kind of already either not quite established as you would think they were, or so established that it's awesome that they're working together. Because Del the Funky Homo Sapien does a song with Dinosaur Jr. of all bands. That's not exactly what you would call heavy metal.
It's an extremely strange mix. It definitely I think hinted at least the main hook on, I shouldn't say the main hook, the main song on this album that has the hook falling really sounds to me like a Handsome Boy Modeling School song. Like it sounds like Breakdown or something like that. However, most of these are covers, correct?
No, not all of them. I mean,
Okay.
like they you know, with hip hop, covers are kind of weird because they're more or less samples. Because that falling bit is, I think, a sampling of a Tom Petty song, I believe. Don't quote me on that. But you know, Another Body Murder.
He does have a
not,
famous song about falling.
That's true, and it's free. So I think that, you know, like Ain't Nothing Like the Real Thing. Yeah, they're cribbing the lyric, but it ain't a cover of the Supreme song. You know, like it's Cypress Hill talking about fucking somebody up with Pearl Jam playing in the background. And that's where I think the soundtrack was better utilized than the movie itself, because they pretty much, as I understand it from the soundtrack producers, they pretty much just let the artists do their thing, and some of them worked out really well. There's fair to middling results. I mean, like the Sir Mix-a-Lot one's a little ridiculous, but it's fun. But even that, it performed better in the Billboard charts than Judgment Night ever did. Even at its peak, it was 17 for a movie soundtrack in the 90s for a piece of shit movie. That's not bad. And I think there's the cultural artifact of this soundtrack, considering where the rest of pop culture was going as far as music is concerned, is interesting. Because 93 is, again, right when it's about to make that shift. So the fact that this, you could argue this was one of the tips of the spear to that era, I think is interesting for such a piece of shit movie. So there are objective reasons that I think, okay, first of all, objectively, the soundtrack's better than the movie because it's shorter, and it's at least not boring. That's the problem with this stupid movie. It would be one thing if it was, you know, illogical, but it's boring as hell. I mean, like, it's just so dull. Like, there's no hook to grab you with any of the characters or any of the situations. I'm not at all afraid that Emilio Estevez is going to get got. Just not going to happen. It's just like, I know that this is going to go.
Well, it's also, like you say, that it's not used... Well, I mean, it's used a bit. Like, I think they only really used 2 songs from the soundtrack in the movie, I feel like, when I was watching it. But the weirder ones...
I caught it a little bit more these times.
I mean, you've probably heard the album more, because I listened to the album and then I watched the movie.
For
just so
sure.
I could kind of keep an eye on it. But, like, they have a song on there where they repeat the name Judgment Night a lot, like, loudly and proudly.
Yeah.
I kind of expected that to happen with the title of the movie. Like, that the title would come up and it would be Judgment Night. But no. And did they ever have the I'm in Love with Mary Jane in the movie?
They did. When they're in the projects, that's the kind of, you can kind of hear it in the background when they're going through the housing project trying to find a phone. You can kind of hear it in the background.
Because for me, that's like
which
the
again,
only
that song is
memorable
basically
song
like,
for me. It's like the only song I remember.
I get it. No. Oh, it's one of the strongest songs on there. I completely agree. I mean, because it's Cypress Hill and Sonic Youth in a studio together. What can we sing about? I don't know. Let's smoke a bowl. Let's think about that, you know, and then like, oh, hey, we got it, you know, like I think that's a remarkable interaction, considering that Sonic Youth is so kind of weird and out there, but they've always kind of had this umbrella of, major record support.
Well, Sonic
so yeah,
Youth
but even
did,
De La
like,
Funky Homo Sapien.
I mean, Sonic Youth has done like rap crossover before. Like I think
For sure.
What was their main song that I think their most famous song is also in a Hal Hartley movie. It's got dancing. Do you know what I'm talking about? This is gonna make me crazy.
Hal Hartley movie. Nope.
That's okay.
But no, I mean, I would
not-
say that
yeah.
probably what the probably the most famous Sonic Youth song is probably what that Teenage Riot song. I would argue.
No, that's probably right.
Probably, but I don't know. I'm not the biggest Sonic Youth fan. I mean, I love Sonic Youth, but I'm not well learned on it. So yeah, I mean, but I grew up. I kind of found this album like when I was in middle school, right when the big switch over to rock rap was really popular and shit. And I found this, and so I liked the soundtrack so much that I watched the movie, and I remember thinking, this movie does not live up to the soundtrack. It just doesn't,
Cool thing.
So yeah,
Sorry.
Yeah.
Quick note.
Oh,
the
cool
Sonic
thing.
Youth
Sure,
song was
sure,
Cool
that-
Thing, and it's from 1992. Anyway.
Sure. Yeah, so like but that's what I'm thinking. Having these artists who are willing to experiment, because apparently even on the soundtrack there was a cut song that with Rage Against the Machine, like a pretty young Rage Against the Machine, when they were still considered kind of rock rap kind of thing, and Tool. The song was called Revolution. It was about 8 minutes long, apparently. But both bands weren't happy with it. It's not that they didn't like working with each other. They just thought, well, this song kind of sucks. Let's just not do it. And they just walked away. They didn't care. And the soundtrack was like, fine, we don't care, whatever. You know, we're just trying to make back that $4 million salary from Emilio. Am I right?
When I listened to the album, I actually heard that song, I think. Like, I'm not sure if they
Really?
added it to a later one. It might have been an extended. I don't know if there was a different one they did that they put on the soundtrack, but I remembered it sounded
I know that somebody
strange.
I know that somebody, because Tool fans are, you know, fucking cult-like, that I think somebody found it on, like, SoundCloud and able to, like, get it out in the ether. Because you also have to keep in mind, like, when I found this shit, like, this is before Napster, you know, so, like, I only had what my area radio was playing, you know, and due to the popularity of this particular genre, it was fucking everywhere. So I kind of went to my Hastings and found that I saw, like, oh, Faith No More, fucking Pearl Jam, Cypress Hill, Sonic, like, let's go. And I loved it.
Have they done this, like, successfully with a different film ever? Because I remember they did try this with Spawn.
And later.
Spawn was rough, because I remember I have that album, and it was like Orbital and Metallica. Those were the bands that they mushed together.
That was
not really a good mix of
because
styles.
like techno music was getting really big in the later part of the 90s, right?
Yeah.
Like house music, EDM, that kind of shit. Yeah. So that was kind of mixing that, because they had like the sneaker pimps with like Marilyn Manson and shit. You know, like, so that does happen quite a bit. And even like, you know, but I mean, like the history of popular artists doing soundtracks for movies is as old as movies itself, practically. I mean, like W.C. Handy showed up, you know, Bessie Smith, you know, a lot of it was just filming them singing. But it really took off, I would argue it really took off with The Graduate in 1961. That would be my argument, when popular artists made it okay for popular artists to do and write songs specifically for the movie. Because then, I mean, you always can use like licensed music and borrow it, but I kind of admire when these songs, because even when I play, Sarah loves that Cypress Hill Sonic Youth song, and then when she found out, like, wait, it was written for this movie. Yep. So they wrote it for. Yep. That's what happened. Yep. They wrote it for the movie. Yeah. And then they later showed up on a Simpsons episode together, which I think is great. So yeah, anyway, what I'm saying is that the cultural legacy of this album is far more relevant and important than anything this movie ever did. The everlasting effect of this soundtrack, I think, is more prominent than the actual movie itself. So therefore, I say the soundtrack is better than the movie. Even if it's not to your taste, which I completely understand, you know, I get it. But it's certainly better than the movie, and it's shorter. You'll get through it.
Yeah, I will. I think that sounds like the start of a final thought. Unless, Zach, do you have something else you want to say?
I got nothing.
No. This is going to be a weird series for me because in terms of like music and music history, it's not my forte, so I'm going to be largely silent during a lot of the deep dive music shit. I don't know. Dennis Leary is a weird choice for an action movie villain. That's all I have to say. I did notice the soundtrack from time to time as the main villain. Yeah. I did notice the soundtrack, and I like enjoyed like early, like a number of songs when I noticed them. I didn't listen to it in isolation after the fact. So like the Mary Jane song, I probably missed it, like playing distantly in the background, you know. There was a song playing at the very beginning that was engaging to me that I don't know what it is. But yeah, like, you know, I noticed some good songs going on. I don't know the history of them. I don't know who wrote them. I just watched the movie. And I've never heard the soundtrack before, so.
Okay. Well, Zach, I know you being a huge Slayer fan wouldn't want to miss them doing a song with Ice-T.
Yeah, I'm also, perhaps me being the youngest, like some of these bands missed me a little more than they missed you guys.
I mean,
fair enough.
These I think missed me too. I think some of these bands I do a little bit. A lot of them sped on past me. But
there you go. I'm right now. I'm the Goldilocks, right?
This
I'm
movie
right
came out,
now.
I was like 4 or 5, so I don't know.
Yeah, definitely didn't see the movie before I heard the soundtrack. That's for sure. But they honestly use that soundtrack. I was reading that to market the movie. Like they marketed the hell out of that soundtrack to market the movie. It's like they knew that, like, well, we're not gonna make our money back on this movie. We could maybe make it back on the soundtrack.
Yeah, I gotta say the same thing. Similar to what Zach said. Like, I know a little bit about music. I can tell you what I don't like and what isn't quite my deal. But
I'll say this. There is a Wikipedia page for the film Judgment Night, and there is a separate Wikipedia page for Judgment Night music from the motion picture. So there you have it.
Well, because apparently there was a whole controversy around the Alvin Silvestri score, because apparently he had scored something completely different, more like a horror movie, and the studio scrapped it and said, no, we need more action, make it more action sounding. And then when you listen to the actual score, when it happens in the movie, you're like, wow, the music's doing a lot of heavy lifting for this action. It's doing a lot. It's like dun 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 dun. Just like, what?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I would have been tempted to have seen the film with the original score to have compared it, so I could have been like, oh,
me too.
That makes more sense. But
me too. And again, I would have cut out a lot of the Dennis Leary monologues. I mean, I get it. You hire Dennis Leary, you might as well have him rant like a fucking lunatic.
Hey, I mean, you can't judge him too hard. It's classic Chekhov. You set up a ladder over a chasm, you introduce it as a danger, then you get a guy about to crawl across it, and he shoves it across, and he lets the ladder fall instead of him. That's the classic thing. Yeah.
And especially when you make fun of bus riding at the beginning of the movie, and then you can't get on the bus. That's dramatic irony. That's what it is.
Absolutely.
But yeah, okay. We'll get to final thoughts. I don't know. Chris Dorff, what do you got?
I think I've kind of said my final thoughts. Like, the soundtrack's okay.
Okay, that's fair.
It's got one banger on it, and everything else is sort of just present. I appreciate it for what it is. I think I'm only going to be listening to Cypress Hill and Sonic Youth for that one song together, and probably never going to touch the soundtrack again. But I might. The De La Soul has some kicks. It's fine.
I get it. All right, Zach. Do you have any more final thoughts that you want to empty into this movie?
This is in some ways it's a difficult movie to talk about because it is not. Obviously, like, there's this idea that, like, the worst thing a movie can be is mediocre, and this movie is kind of that. Like, it's not monumentally bad. None of the performances are so terrible that I'm like, oh, this is absolute dross. It's like, it's the most bog standard action movie you can think of. Like, it is a movie you watch to waste 2 hours and then forget about. And I don't know how to wrap that up. That's what it is.
That's what happened.
Yeah, the soundtrack is better. I noticed it sometimes. I'm sure that I will agree with the supposition that the soundtrack is better than the film itself. But the film is neither good nor bad. And when we do like an annual what did we watch in the past year thing for this show, like, this might be the movie I remember. There's a good chance it'll be the movie I remember the least.
You'll probably forget that you even saw it because I only watched it this morning, and I'm telling you, it's like ether. It's just evaporating. Because
it's burned into my memory now. For me, I don't remember this until the day I die. I will be considering the horrible plight of Jeremy Piven getting a party bus that was too big in an alley that was too small. He reached too close to the sun. He's a modern Icarus. He even fell like Icarus did, right from the sky onto the hard streets of Chicago.
I love that they have the satellite dish in traffic to watch the boxing match. And then that satellite dish miraculously goes away. And you saw the satellite dish in the 90s. That thing's a fucking satellite dish, right?
It was big, it was
like
big.
NASA and shit.
They also had an NES in there, which was cool.
Yeah, right, that was cool.
Yeah.
Well, I do want to shout out to our corporate overlords for all the product placement in this. You gotta love it. Like, there's a Subaru sign for no reason. The guy carrying it, which I think is the funniest part of the movie. There's like anyway, lots Lots of product placement in this movie. Like I said, they had to make their money back for overpaying Emilio Estevez. Yeah, I agree with all of you. This movie sucks. I mean, it would be one thing if it. I think if it's just like your standard action fare, because like you think of like what we watched earlier, like The Mummy and stuff, where it's just sort of like action by the numbers, really, like that's kind of how I felt with this film. But like The Mummy, like it bored me to tears. Like there wasn't really any moment, like especially the final shootout in the shopping mall. I was just like waiting for it to end because I know where this is going. Everybody's gonna get picked off. It's gonna be down to Emilio and Dennis Leary, and Emilio's gonna save the day. What I didn't expect, because yes, I think Zach's right that this movie is competent. It's not. I didn't want to gouge my eyes out. There's no deep hurting going on, except for the dialogue. The dialogue was pretty not offensive, but just bad. I mean, like even the whole, they were trying to set up some sort of stupid inner conflict with Emilio Estevez and his wife at the beginning of the movie that like barely has any payoff. All it is that like
well, she never
when hanging out with
returns
the
again,
boys.
so.
Right, yeah, other than in picture form. And then I guess a cop at the end says, "You got a good-looking wife and family." I'm like, well, I guess he learned his fucking lesson. Never go out ever. Which I think is stupid, and I think it's harmful in the overall cultural conversation dealing with crime and poverty. So, yeah, this movie sucks, and I'll probably never watch it again.
So,
other
what's
than
next?
I love the soundtrack. Yeah, well, before we get on to what's next, let me get a rundown of the points real quick, because I did give out a bonus point. So, Chris Boroff, you have 11 points for final voting, because I gave you a point for the cartoon worldview of crime and poverty. And then Zach and I, we have 3 bonus points. Zach and Chris, you have 3 bonus points to give out, and we and Zach have 10 points each for final voting. So, that brings us to Zach Powers' choice of movie.
Yeah.
What movie has a soundtrack that is better than the movie?
We're famously stingy with points on the first episode of a round. But yeah, so here's the thing about this choice. Many years ago, in the previous iteration of this podcast, I was visiting New York, and I joined you fellas for an episode. And it was the first time I'd ever interacted with Chris. It was the beginning of this modern show. And one of the films we covered was a little film in that episode called Batman Forever. A film with a famous soundtrack.
Oh, no.
And we're going to go back to our roots, baby. We're going to recover the very first movie I ever talked about with you guys. We're talking about it once again.
I love everything about this. I love... Zach, you're my favorite person of the week. I love that you have found a way to make Carlsen revisit his childhood trauma.
Oh my God, no.
It's the first movie we ever talked about. We're talking about it again over 10 years later.
Zach, I can already tell you, I agree with you wholeheartedly. That the soundtrack, whatever you think of it, is much better than that movie. Because that Method Man, Redman song about the Riddler is pretty cool.
There's a few songs on there that are pretty good.
Yeah.
I'm actually
U2
surprised.
notwithstanding.
I'm surprised because I actually don't have a good memory of that soundtrack at all. Like, I remember...
Well, there's one song that's very famous. The Flamin' Lips are on there. They have a pretty good song on there.
That was a great song. Great song on that soundtrack.
Yeah,
no, boy. Okay, wow. Joel Schumacher, here we go. All right, well, I got to hand it to you, Zach. You were maintaining with the theme of we've been doing top shelf. Time to do the Drek. Time to do the well water. Trying to do the well drinks, and boy, you're delivering. So I wish I could say I cannot wait to watch this movie.
It was too appealing. It was the beginning,
you
and
trapped me, my friend.
Yeah.
Movie trapped
I'm
me.
actually excited to see if there's a 4K restoration, because I betcha that this film has had a restoration since we've seen it last time. We could actually go up to a higher definition now and really see the bat nipples. We've been missing out all these years.
And to think they didn't do that for Judgment Night. For shame.
Are the nipples in this one? I thought they were. Are they in this one and Batman and Robin? Or
They're both.
I thought it was just Batman.
Both.
Okay.
Nope. They're in both. As soon as Joel Schumacher came aboard, yeehaw. Okay, well, this has been enjoyable, at least to talk about these movies, and it's gonna be even more enjoyable next time. So tune in to watch Russell probably have an aneurysm while watching Batman Forever. So, thank you all for joining us and enduring these films with us. Please do find us on all the places you get your podcasts on, and let us know if you prefer to have like YouTube videos, if you like the YouTube, or if you just want the audio. Go ahead and reach out to us. Comment on our Facebook or on our Twitter or on our YouTube page. Tell us what you like, what you don't like. We like to hear feedback. Otherwise, we'll just keep screaming into ether like we do. Thanks again, and join us next time for Batman Forever. My name is Russell Carlsen, and I have been joined by Chris Dorff.
You guys are unbelievable. I was there, and I don't even believe it. That's the line from the movie.
Is it? Okay. Yeah. See, like I said, it's just evaporating. And I've also been joined by Zach Powers.
This ring's worth $15K. Johnny Drama, E, Turtle, etc.
Okay. And as we always say here on the Movie Trap, Diane Ladd is too young to play Chevy Chase's mom. You heard it here.
It's the Movie Trap promise. Yeah.
It is. See you later, folks. Bye.
Easy, fellas. Hear me out a second. Just.
Yep, that's me. You're probably wondering how I ended up in this situation.